Good evening. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Welcome to Truth Report. Tonight, we're bringing you 5 interconnected stories that reveal a global power structure increasingly willing to sacrifice human lives, financial security, and environmental stability for profit and geopolitical dominance.
We're starting with breaking revelations from an unprecedented joint investigation by Bellingcat, PBS Frontline, and The Washington Post. On June 13 of last year, Israeli missiles slammed into apartment buildings across Tehran in the early morning hours. By sunrise, 9 men closely associated with Iran's nuclear program were dead. But they weren't the only casualties.
According to the investigation, dozens of civilians died in those strikes. One 14-story residential tower completely collapsed. This wasn't precision warfare targeting military installations. This was residential neighborhoods turned into war zones.
The operation, dubbed Rising Lion, lasted 12 days. And here's what's critical: on day 10, the United States joined Israel in direct strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. This represents explicit U.S. military coordination in attacks on nuclear infrastructure.
The verification methods used by investigators are worth noting because they demonstrate what real journalism looks like. Bellingcat analysts used satellite imagery, social media video footage, death notices, cemetery records, and conducted on-site visits. They interviewed IAEA officials in Vienna and intelligence sources. This is painstaking, multi-source verification.
Iran characterizes its nuclear program as peaceful energy research. Israel and the United States have long claimed weapons development intentions. But regardless of the intelligence assessment, the tactical decision here is stunning, targeting nuclear scientists in their homes, in densely populated civilian areas.
Let's be clear about what this operation represents strategically. This is preemptive warfare based on threat assessment, not defensive response to attack. It's assassination of technical personnel alongside military strikes on sovereign infrastructure. And it establishes a precedent that any nation with nuclear ambitions, or even nuclear energy programs, can be subject to military attack.
The geopolitical implications are enormous. We're not talking about sanctions, diplomatic pressure, or even covert sabotage. We're talking about overt military strikes on nuclear facilities, with all the escalation risks that entails. What happens when other nations decide they have the right to conduct similar preemptive strikes based on their threat assessments?
And there's a direct energy dimension here that connects to our other stories tonight. Iran sits on some of the world's largest oil and gas reserves. Destabilizing Iran, preventing its nuclear program from succeeding, keeps Iranian energy exports constrained by sanctions and instability. That benefits other oil-producing nations and maintains certain power structures in global energy markets.
Now let's turn to a crisis happening in convenience stores and gas stations across America. According to a major investigation by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, crypto ATM scams are exploding, and the retailers hosting these machines are cashing in while victims lose hundreds of millions.
The numbers are staggering. The FBI received nearly 11,000 fraud complaints involving crypto ATMs in 2024 alone. That's a 99% increase from the previous year, with approximately $247 million in alleged losses. Between January and November of 2025, losses reached $333 million.
Here's how the scam works. Fraudsters contact victims claiming their computers have been hacked, or impersonating bank employees, Federal Reserve representatives, or law enforcement. Victims are threatened with criminal charges or account freezes. Then they're directed to withdraw cash and convert it to Bitcoin at nearby ATMs. Once converted, the cryptocurrency transfers instantaneously to criminal wallets overseas, beyond law enforcement reach.
Circle K operates the largest retail partnership with Bitcoin Depot, hosting approximately 750 machines across US and Canada locations. And despite mounting complaints, Circle K extended its contract with Bitcoin Depot through mid-2026 in January of last year. Why? Because the money is too good.
Bitcoin Depot collected 15 to 50% of each transaction in 2024. The Circle K relationship alone accounted for nearly a quarter of the company's annual revenue. Circle K received monthly payments up to $700 per machine, plus increased foot traffic.
One victim, Steve Beckett, lost $7,000 after being convinced his life savings were at risk. He was directed to deposit funds at a Circle K Bitcoin Depot ATM over 2 days. Of that $7,000 Beckett lost, Bitcoin Depot pocketed approximately $2,000 in fees. That's a nearly 30% cut of a fraud victim's stolen money.
Iowa's Attorney General found that over 50% of Bitcoin Depot transactions in the state involved scams between October 2021 and July 2024. For CoinFlip ATM network, approximately 90% of examined transactions were scam-related. 90%. This isn't incidental fraud. This is a business model built on fraud.
And here's the most damning detail. A former Bitcoin Depot employee stated, quote, "If we were to eliminate scams 100%, we would be hurting." That's an admission that profit margins depend on fraud prevalence.
Regulatory response has been pathetically inadequate. As of September, only 18 states have passed laws protecting consumers against crypto ATM scams. Transaction limits exist in some states, $1,000 to $2,000 daily for new users, but scammers circumvent these by conducting multiple transactions under different names.
Mark Grenz, whose company Digital Mint attempted to establish industry compliance standards, found that other operators resisted reform efforts. Why would they? The current system is wildly profitable for operators and host retailers. Victims are mostly elderly people terrified by sophisticated psychological manipulation. Law enforcement can't recover cryptocurrency sent overseas. It's the perfect crime, industrialized and franchised at your local gas station.
Holiday gas stations, owned by Circle K's parent company Alimentación Couche-Tard, have also been targeted by scammers. Fairway grocery stores removed 66 Bitcoin Depot ATMs in February 2025 after finding them to be, quote, instrumentalities of massive fraud. But Circle K? They renewed the contract.
Now let's examine the ideological framework being constructed to justify expanded fossil fuel extraction. Diana Furch-Guttroth, director of the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation, authored the Department of Transportation chapter for Project 2025, the policy blueprint for the current administration.
According to reporting compiled from multiple sources including the Heritage Foundation's own announcements, Furch-Guttroth is explicit in her opposition to renewable energy and her advocacy for coal, oil, and gas. She argues that solar and wind are unreliable and require substantial government subsidies that distort the market. Her preference for fossil fuels stems from what she claims is their affordability, reliability, and contribution to American energy independence.
In the DOT chapter, Furch-Guttroth states her opposition to Biden's, quote, anti-fossil fuel climate agenda and calls for gutting fuel economy standards, which she claims, quote, have no meaningful effect on global temperature trends. She's a denier of human-caused climate change.
Project 2025 advocates for increased oil and gas production, streamlined permitting processes for energy infrastructure projects, and reduction in regulations that hinder fossil fuel development. This is not subtle policy preference. This is a comprehensive dismantling of environmental oversight in service of extraction industries.
The statement attributed to Furch-Guttroth, "We won't let anyone stop us from using our oil and gas," encapsulates the authoritarian dimension of this agenda. It's not "we believe market forces favor fossil fuels." It's "we won't let anyone stop us." That's a declaration of intent to override opposition, whether from communities, scientists, or democratic processes.
This connects directly to our next story. Globally, we're seeing political consolidation around resource extraction and energy policy. In Japan, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, the country's first female prime minister, just called a snap election for February 8, dissolving parliament on January 23.
According to reporting from Al Jazeera, Time, Bloomberg, and Japanese media, Takaichi is capitalizing on historic approval ratings, 75% according to Nikkei surveys. This marks the third consecutive month above 70%. She's seeking voter backing for increased spending, tax cuts, and a new security strategy expected to accelerate defense buildup.
One of her key promises is a 2-year exemption of the 8% food levy to cushion rising living costs. Scrapping that levy would reduce government revenue by an estimated 5 trillion yen, about $32 billion annually. Where does that money get made up? Her plan includes what's described as energy subsidies and economic stimulus spending.
Energy subsidies in Japan historically mean support for nuclear power and fossil fuel infrastructure. Japan has been gradually restarting nuclear reactors shut down after the Fukushima disaster. Takaichi's defense buildup and energy subsidies suggest continued commitment to centralized, large-scale energy infrastructure rather than distributed renewables.
And that brings us to our final story, which ties everything together. The Trump administration has made nuclear power for AI a national security priority, with a goal of quadrupling the United States' nuclear capacity from 100 gigawatts to 400 gigawatts by 2050.
According to multiple sources including NPR, the National Interest, and the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the administration has created a fast-track program to construct new and untested reactor designs built by private firms. The explicit goal is having at least 3 nuclear test reactors operational by July 4, 2026. That's less than 6 months from now.
This program is sidestepping the regulatory system that's overseen the nuclear industry for half a century. If the goal is met, it will be without direct oversight of America's primary nuclear regulator. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is being bypassed in the name of speed and national security.
AI data centers alone will require an additional 120 gigawatts by 2030, totaling about 160 gigawatts, just over half of Germany's entire installed power generation capacity in 2023. The energy demands of artificial intelligence are genuinely massive and growing exponentially.
But here's the critical question: who pays the price? President Trump stated he wants tech companies to foot the bill for new power plants. But the social and environmental costs, the risks of untested reactor designs, the production of nuclear waste, the potential for accidents, those get distributed to communities whether they consent or not.
And whether communities will accept this is very much an open question, according to reporting from Le Monde Diplomatique and Carnegie Endowment Analysis. In Pennsylvania, community opposition forced revisions to an agreement between Talon Energy and Amazon Web Services. Amazon was required to draw from the overall electricity grid instead of directly from a nuclear power plant, after local residents and lawmakers objected.
Lawmakers have to heed the needs of their constituents to mitigate the potential for mass public opposition to nuclear energy growth in the United States in the coming years. But the July 4th deadline puts enormous pressure on the program. When you're racing to hit a political milestone, safety considerations get compressed. Testing gets abbreviated. Community input becomes an obstacle rather than a democratic necessity.
So let's connect these 5 stories, because the pattern is unmistakable. In Iran, we see military force used to control nuclear technology and maintain geopolitical power structures that benefit certain oil-producing nations. In the crypto ATM scams, we see corporate profit prioritized over consumer protection, with regulatory capture allowing fraud to become a business model.
In Project 2025's energy agenda, we see ideological commitment to fossil fuel extraction framed as energy independence, with explicit rejection of climate science and democratic opposition. In Japan, we see political consolidation around increased spending and energy subsidies that likely favor centralized nuclear and fossil infrastructure.
And in the US nuclear rush for AI, we see technology companies' profit motives, the need to power AI data centers, driving a wholesale bypass of safety regulations, with communities expected to accept risks they didn't choose and can't control.
The common thread is the subordination of human welfare, environmental stability, and democratic process to corporate profit and state power. Whether it's bombing apartment buildings to prevent nuclear proliferation, enabling crypto fraud for transaction fees, gutting environmental regulations for oil companies, or fast-tracking untested reactors for AI companies, the logic is the same.
Power concentrates. Costs distribute. Profits privatize. Risks socialize. This is not a series of unrelated policy choices. This is a coherent structure of dominance that operates across energy systems, financial systems, and military systems.
The victims in Tehran didn't choose to live next to nuclear scientists. Steve Beckett didn't choose to have his life savings stolen through a machine at Circle K. Communities in Pennsylvania and elsewhere didn't choose to host nuclear reactors for Amazon's AI development.
But the beneficiaries, weapons manufacturers, crypto ATM operators, fossil fuel companies, tech giants, they made very deliberate choices. They chose profit over safety. They chose expansion over sustainability. They chose dominance over democracy.
And they're being enabled by political structures that increasingly treat public input as an impediment rather than a right. Fast-track permitting. Regulatory bypass. Ideological rejection of scientific consensus. Military action without declaration of war. These are not signs of responsive democratic governance.
The question facing all of us is whether we accept this framework. Do we accept that AI companies' need for cheap power justifies bypassing nuclear safety regulations? Do we accept that gas stations can profit from industrialized fraud? Do we accept that climate science can be dismissed by political appointees with fossil fuel industry ties?
Do we accept that apartment buildings in Tehran are legitimate military targets? Do we accept that energy policy gets made by and for extraction industries and tech monopolies, while communities bear the risks and costs?
Because accepting these things means accepting a world where power operates without accountability, where profit trumps human life, and where the future is sacrificed for quarterly earnings.
These stories are happening now. The strikes on Iran happened last year. The crypto scams are happening today. Project 2025 is current administration policy. Japan's election is in 3 weeks. The nuclear reactors are supposed to be operational in less than 6 months.
This is not abstract. This is not distant. This is the architecture of power being constructed in real time, and it's being built on a foundation of violence, fraud, extraction, and concentrated control.
We can't report our way out of this alone. Journalism exposes, but exposure without response is just documentation of atrocity. What's needed is organized opposition, communities refusing to host infrastructure they didn't choose, consumers demanding regulatory protection, voters rejecting politicians who serve corporate interests over public welfare.
What's needed is recognition that these stories are connected, that the crypto scam at your local Circle K and the nuclear strikes on Tehran are part of the same system, that the climate denier writing energy policy and the tech CEO demanding fast-tracked reactors are serving the same structure of power.
What's needed is refusal. Refusal to accept this as normal. Refusal to accept this as inevitable. Refusal to let power operate without resistance.
The pattern is clear. The structure is visible. The question is what we do about it.
I'm Alex Truth.
I'm Maya Clarity.
This has been Truth Report. Stay informed. Stay angry. And demand better.
Good night.